let's get started, because we have work to do. I think we have a lot of work to do, and particularly after last week, we have a lot of work to do. And Maine has some experience in dealing with very inconsistent politicians. Data, information, and knowledge, right? We are the right profession for the right time. What do I mean by that? And so I'm going to make you a deal. I promise that this will end up with some very practical things that we should do. But to get there, I've got to start pretty vague, pretty broad, right? No, don't worry, it's not another 400-page pointy book. But I want to start with something that seems pretty, we all know this, right? Data, information, knowledge. We use these terms as if they're synonymous, as if, well, you got a bunch of data, and oh, I'm going to send you the information, and what is knowledge? And we use these back and forth all the time. And I'm going to argue that we can't do that anymore. I'm going to argue that librarians and librarianship is all about knowledge. And that is fundamentally different, and it changes fundamentally what we do, and I'm going to use a couple of examples. Right? So we live now in the glory days of data, right? So the glory days of data are between, deep, big data and data science and data analytics. And I'm sure even if you haven't adopted it yet, at some point, someone's probably approached your library and talked about how can we use data more effectively, right? Whether that's at a very abstract level, can we just know how many people are coming in the gate? Are these number counts right? Or even in very sophisticated. We have some academic librarians in the crowd. Okay. If it hasn't happened, at some point there will be a discussion about the fact that students are producing data on our campuses. What can we do with that? What should we do with that? I talked to a bunch of freshmen. I said, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to cut your tuition in half. And they said, oh, that's great. I said, this is how I'm going to do it. I'm going to take all the data that you produce with your lovely ID card, and I'm going to sell it. Right? I know when you eat. Sometimes I know what you eat. I know who you're with. I know when you're there. I know what you buy. I know what your books are. I know what your preferences are. I know your date of birth. I know your geographic location. I know where you spend your time. Good news, there are people who want to know this. And the freshman said, okay. Right? Those discussions are happening now. For my K-12, my school librarian folks, if you're here, right? This is all about data, right? We want to know data progress and testing, and then we can do analytics, and then we can talk to evaluation. Data is the goal. Data is going to save us, right? This is the reason I had the Target dog up there, is one of my favorite data stories. Comes out of retail. And it turns out that major retailers like Target and Walmart and such, they know that there are certain times in a woman's life when she will drastically change her purchasing habits. There are certain events that, things like getting a first job, suddenly you can afford not to go to Kmart anymore, etc. Right? They know that one of the primary points is that when a woman becomes pregnant, her buying habits change. And this is a time that you can get them to change their sort of retail loyalty. Suddenly, the idea goes they begin buying vitamins. Suddenly, it becomes organic becomes important. Suddenly, quality becomes important, right? This whole thing begins to change. And so, Target knew this, and so they could begin analyzing, and looking at purchasing habits, looking at people buying habits, and they got it down to a really precise means. They could figure out from purchasing habits when someone was pregnant. And they could then begin sending them coupons, and they could begin sending them information and trying to get them over to Target. It's so well that what happens is they found this one person, she made the purchasing habits, they began sending information, diaper coupons, and all these other things. And it turns out it was a teenage girl living at home, and her father, looking at all the incoming mail, went, are you crazy? What are you trying to do? Promote pregnancy to my daughter? He went down to Target and complained. Turns out, Target was right. Target told her father she was pregnant before she did. So data can be immensely powerful. It can be immensely scary, right? And it brings up ethical concerns, and it brings up a whole host of things. But we live in an era now when data is supposed to help us. When data is, now we can live in this world where we can analyze it, we can investigate, we can look at data. And many times in librarianship, particularly back in the era, this was our job. Even today, when we look at the idea of academic librarianship, open access, do we keep data repositories, we see that city planning is now looking at city stat, implementing statistics, looking at where, for example, crime exists in different sectors. Philadelphia did this, and they analyzed, and they found that, for example, it turns out that areas that have public libraries have lower crime rates. Turns out they also build libraries very near police stations. Which of those is true? I don't know. So we'd like to think that data is important. Data has become this mantra. Data is now the service. Data is something that we're wrestling with. And libraries are trying to figure out what's our role in data. And we're going to get to that in a moment. But we realize that data is not enough. We've long known that. You can't simply hand people books if they can't read. You can't simply give them devices that they can't use. So we've long ago abandoned the concept that libraries' primary role is to provide stuff. Right? We don't do stuff. We keep it, we house it, but we see that the role of the librarian in particular is not the stuff business. We're in the information business. And so pick the flavor. I picked the big six because Mike Eisenberg was my advisor and he pays me to do this. But right, it's about information. It's about information literacy. It's about, we were just talking about the BTOP grant. Once we provide that bandwidth, once we provide that access, we have to provide literacy and instruction. In K-12, we have to not only bring people into the library and get their books, we have to teach them how to analyze information, evaluate it, put it down, right? Information literacy curriculum. In ACRL, they have their information literacy. By the way, why does ASL have information literacy and ACRL have information literacy standards and they never talk? We'll leave that alone. All right. Threshold concepts. This idea that information is what we're into, right? That it's not just the book, it's the selection of the book. It's not just the access, it's access to instruction as well, right? So we became in the information business. And the idea is that we could get out and help people with the deluge of information. We can help people in search bubbles. We can help people understand how things are going. And I'm going to argue that we're not in this business either. And the last thing I'm going to argue is that if you think of knowledge looks like this, that's problematic. And it certainly does not look like this. That's not knowledge. Now, I mentioned I'm in South Carolina, so I'm going to begin making that argument by telling you that when I first arrived at South Carolina, the director at the time, Sam Hastings, took me out to lunch with several of my staff members, and I was specifically to teach Dave how to be Southern. Didn't work. But the first thing they said is, remember, everyone is related. You've heard of 7 degrees of bacon? This is 1 degree of South Carolina. Because they literally said, my great-grandmother was her grandmother's primary school teacher. And they remembered that, right? And so it's like, if you're talking to someone, it's going to be someone's cousin and they're going to find you. So they said, remember that. The other thing they said is, don't swear. Oh, well. And then they taught me the smile and nod. The smile, so let me demonstrate. Because most people think the smile and nod's like this. No. The smile and nod is when you smile, but your eyes say, I could kill you. It's creepy when they do it well. But the other thing they said is the 2 things you should never talk about in public is politics and religion. So I'm going to begin our discussion about the difference between data, information, and knowledge here. So why am I beginning it here? Oh, Dave, really, please, go, we're tired. No, I don't want to have this discussion again. And by the way, I also want to be really clear. This will not be a pro-Hillary. This will not be a pro-Trump. It really isn't. But this allows us, in the most beautiful and astounding ways, to demonstrate the business that we are in, right? Because this election demonstrates beautifully the limitations of data and the limitations of information. So if you were like me, you were watching all the lovely predictions and you saw things like this. Yay! All right, I'm a Democrat. Right? I don't know. Maybe, once again, I'm not asking you to self-identify, but if you woke up that morning and you were a Democrat, you were feeling pretty good about yourself. You were watching the live stream of everyone in Rochester putting Susan B. Anthony voting stickers. You were ready for the landslide. You're ready to have it. Because all the data said that's what should happen. Right? This is, by the way, not at the beginning of the election. This is the day before the election. Right? Here's another one. Closer, but it's still there, the Bloomberg report. Here's another one. Even Fox News said we were going to win. Fox News! Oh, man, it was awesome. This is my favorite. This is still on their website. This is 568, the data people. Right? What happened? What happened? Yeah, I know. Yeah, what happened? What happened? Because this is a really interesting example. Because a lot of people don't understand how polling works. They don't understand data. We have looked in the presidential election as the clearest example, but it's not the only example of where we look at data as the important factor, where we have turned data into the goal. We believe and invested data with a nearly magical quality. We believe that data somehow will tell us what will happen, that it's reliable, that it's scientific, that it's objective. But that's not how polling is done. That is not what data does. So another quick story. 2 weekends ago, I went to the, what's the comedian with the puppets? Jeff Dunham. I went to a Jeff Dunham concert. He was hilarious. He started it. He came out and he goes, all right, I want you to, don't booze, but if you're pro-candidate, whatever. Pro-Hillary, pro Trump. In North Charleston, and I was a little frightened about making it out of there that day. And he said, I've done this concert in the North, I've done this concert in the West, I've done this concert whatever, and I always get the same results. And that's the thing. He says that what he tells you is that Democrats don't like puppet shows. I thought that was hilarious. But this is what I want you to understand. That you will be told that data is important and crucial and a coming factor, and this is what we should worry about, and this is what we should focus. But this is just a really itty-bitty example of what leads to that data. It's not a simple matter of them going, asking 50 people, and then saying, yes, out of the 50 people, this many people said they're going to vote. Survey data comes from a really, really intense mathematical process, dealing with everything from factors and summations and statistics to the concept of oversampling. Oversampling is when you find that group isn't well represented, you add numbers. And you go to certain key demographics and characters. And over the decades, polling has really emerged as a primary metric. It is a science. And it was wrong. And the reason it was wrong is because while we believe that data is objective, while we believe data is important, while we give it this nearly heavenly quality, it is only as good as the assumptions that go into it. For example, we assume that when we ask people who they're going to vote for, they tell us the truth. Right? We assume that people are going to vote the way they used to. We assume that the same groups will show up every time. We build in our assumptions into data. And so what we end up doing is we believe that the outcome of this process is objective and understandable, when in fact it is based on our biases and assumptions from the start. This was hard baked into how would a classical election work, and it wasn't a classical election. We see this all the time. So we're not in the data business, but I want to just use this as a warning to say we're going to hear a lot about data. And I'm not saying data bad. Really, I have a PhD. I know data. By the way, this is also the fact that if you can't understand or interpret this equation, which by the way I can't, if you don't do a survey. This is why you're going to go to SurveyMonkey and you're going to ask how many people love your library, and I'm going to look at you and go, I don't believe you. Right? Because it's not as simple as saying, ask 10 people, divide by 2. It's hard. So, all right, that's okay. We're not in the data business. Data's manipulable. We've known this for a long time. We're in the information business. So I'm going to look at the election again and say, okay, if we're in the information business, that information layer, it's not just data and counts. It's the idea of how people interpret and understand. And once again, I ask you, is this an election that lacked in information? This is real-time fact-checking. I love this one. Trump says he watched non-existent video of Iran receiving cash. Right? You just knew the people at CNN by the middle of this election were just tired of it. Trump, I never said Japan should have nukes. He did. Right? Let's see, I think I've got another one. Oh, well, no, look. Equal opportunity. PolitiFact. What's true, what's false. This is an election that we can't say people made a decision in the absence of information. We can't say this is a situation where people just didn't know something. Once again, however you want to say that the pollsters didn't have access to the information, or that the Democrats didn't have access, or the Republicans, or the whatever. This was an information-rich environment. You cannot argue that there wasn't enough information out there to have your cause be put forward. You can also not argue if you believe that you were in some objective truth, that somehow that truth was not present, that there wasn't a screening by the media, by education, by whatever. There was a huge amount of fact-checking and information and literacy initiatives and literacy efforts. Right? We can't say that this election turned on a dearth of information or a dearth of data. Right? Why did we get it so wrong, the prediction, the algorithms, when we had all the data, we had all the materials? You're sitting there going, Dave, I really don't want a political discussion. And you said it's going to be practical. It is. What I want you to think about for a moment is, all right, so this is a big election. But think about your local tax issue. Think about your local information literacy initiative for freshmen. Think about your local curriculum. And ask yourself, how much are you relying on how well you know your community by data? How much do you depend on data or information resources or something to tell you about your community, what they're thinking and what they need? How much of that is based on talking amongst yourself? Or talking to only the people who walk in the door? Because what we need, what this election needed in terms of making these predictions and understanding what was about to happen, was not data, was not information, but it was knowledge. What was necessary was knowledge. And as I said before, if you think of knowledge as books and materials, stop it. It's not true. Knowledge is a uniquely human thing. It's in our brains. Knowledge is how you react to information and data. It's what you collect and pay attention to. What we've seen over and over and over again is when you move someone from a false assumption to a true reality, it does not begin by simply throwing information at them. It begins by understanding how they see that reality. And then, and only then, to begin to bridge forward. Now, in a political context, you can argue which way forward is. But we also know this from education. You don't start by saying, oh, you're in third grade, you can get calculus, here's a book, right? You scaffold to that, you build that. We know this, that when you look at the idea of doing a bond issue, a tax millage, whatever it is, you don't assume that you can go out and say, community, we're important, love us, give us money. You have to build an argument over time and a set of relationships, and right? Knowledge is how we affect how people see the world. And that's the business that as librarians we are in. We are in the knowledge business. Right? Because I'm going to give you another one. Talked about politics, it's time for religion. What people missed, because we were so focused on the election, is this was also the year anniversary of the French terrorist attacks. Right? In Europe, in France, this was their 9/11. This is what they saw. When terrorists shot up nightclubs, when they tried to bomb soccer stadiums, when people died. And what was the response? It's the same response that we put after 9/11, which is, oh, we need more surveillance. We need more information. We need more data. That false assumption that if we just collected more metadata, more information, if we just followed more people, if we just watched more going on, we will know more. Our response to this was knowledge equals more data, metadata, Snowden, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And we created and still push forward a false dichotomy that privacy equals security. That if you want to be secure, we must know more about you. That to have your data, to have your information is to keep you safe. And that's the argument, right? The argument is data and information is all we need. When in fact, what we need is knowledge. What do I mean by that? What I mean by that is, when we looked at what's happening over and over again, the narrative was we didn't know these folks were in our community. We didn't know what was happening. Well, if you don't go out and talk with them, if you don't go out and have that discussion, if you don't connect them, if you don't really discuss the world, of course you don't have the knowledge. And all the data in the world and all the knowledge, all the information in the world won't help you if you don't know the people you're working with. This has led us to the situation where now we assume anyone who's a Muslim is a potential hazard. Meanwhile, people who can buy guns legally go and shoot up schools. Why? Because we don't know our own communities. Right? As librarians, we hold this value true. We don't believe this. We see that in things like the Patriot Act. We see that in things like setting up Tor in libraries. Yay, New England. In order to counter and to have this discussion, we have to know who's there. We have to know and talk and feel like a community. We can't be surprised by someone's reaction if we've never talked to them before. The value, the importance of knowledge is human-to-human connection. Yes, data is important. Information is important. Information literacy, equity of access, essential. But it comes down to the fact that it begins with knowing your neighbor, with knowing who's in the community and what they care about, in knowing what the issues are, in knowing what people need. And knowing doesn't come from data and information. That can help you, but it starts with talking. It starts with relationships. It starts with access and outreach. It starts with being out in the world. And what we've seen is that knowledge we're starting to do it right. And back to the right profession in the right time, what we see is that we're talking now about what librarians can do. Because here's the trick. As many institutions, as many organizations are migrating more and more to a data world, more and more to an information world, more and more to more stuff, libraries are moving more and more to engagement, more and more to community, more and more to knowledge. We see this in everything that where some libraries transform communities turned into libraries transformed. The Expect More book. The current president, Julie Todaro. Her theme, anyone know it? The expert in the library. What she said, libraries transform, community says, we're important, we're community focused, be that a community of academics, community of politicians, community of doctors, communities of municipality, we need to be there. Talking about the Hardwood report and such. And then libraries transform that we can talk about how to access people, engage people, bring them into new ways. And now we need the experts in the library to make that happen, right? Because I remember having this discussion with Sarah. They don't. Libraries don't transform. Libraries exert gravity and shield you from the rain. Librarians transform, right? It takes that human, sure. And I should take this moment to step back for a moment. There are 3 ways to become a librarian. Number 1, you get your degree. Please do, pay me, thank you. Librarian by education. Librarian by job title. You're hired, you're a librarian. You know, with a swift pen and paycheck, you become a librarian. It's a reality. And the third, and I think most interesting, is librarian by spirit. The feral librarians. And I don't just mean people who alphabetize the books on their nightstand. I'm talking about people who truly understand equity of access, engagement, the importance of knowledge, right? We see those out there. So when I say librarians transform, that's not me saying, let me check your degree in the way. That's me saying, if you are part of an organization, part of a community that's making it better, you're a librarian. I have a really simple test. It's the hit by a bus test. If you're hit by a bus and the library can't operate or open in the morning, you're a librarian. We talk about transformation all the time. We talk about this, and I want to be really clear. This isn't true. We have moved this profession. Think about it for a moment. In 30 years, which is not that long ago because I'm old now, so that's, used to be 30 years. But, yeah. We've moved from the idea of a library as a collector of materials, a place to have it, into the place that we are no longer a monopoly of information. Right? We have Microsoft and Google and all these other folks. We're part of a much richer tapestry. Our collections have blown up. Does anyone here remember the arguments about should we put URLs in a MARC record? Think back, it's there. Think about the idea, because what that was if it's an information resource and we're going to have access to the library, it must go through a MARC record, we must, right? And we've moved to the point of, we're an access point. Whether it's to a licensed database, whether it's to the internet, whatever it is, that is an amazing transformation. We always love to make fun of catalogers, like somehow they're the old guard. Catalogers and people in technical services have moved farther in this field than any other part of librarianship. They have moved from the idea of collection as what we own and pay for as to anything we can get our hands on. And trust me, I saw the pain that went with that. Right? There are still, Ferber, really? Ferber, right? We had to give it up. We had to finally say, you know what? It's okay. And now we see public services having to make the same transformation. And you sit there and go, what are you talking about? We've always been cool. Think about your library for a moment. If I walked in to your library and I said, I have this resource, I think it'd be really useful to my community, what can you do with it? You wouldn't bat an eye. You go, oh, great, thank you. We have a process, we'll evaluate it. If we like it, we'll catalog it, we'll put it on the shelf. If not, it'll go in the book sale, yay. Right? No problem. By the way, you know the old joke? Why do the Friends of the Libraries have book sales? So they can save all the books that the retired librarians didn't want you to weed. Now, same situation. I walk into your library and I say, I'm a resource that I think could be greatly used by your community. How can I help? And you go, Or maybe you go, well, we do have a lovely volunteer program. Perhaps you could dust. I went to this lovely, amazing, wonderful STEM education and the public library. How public libraries can help STEM education. I say that in my authoritative voice. If you'd like, I can say it in my 30s voice. Boffo! Public libraries join up with STEM education to save the world as we know it. You know why public libraries aren't doing really great in STEM education? And I know, by the way, we have exceptions. We have STEM librarians, and I think that's wonderful. But you know why we have to have STEM librarians? Because how many people here have a degree in the hard sciences? How many people, all right, exempting you, congratulations. How many people that didn't raise their hand want to start a public program next week on gravitational wave detection? Right. Meanwhile, how many people want to do one on gardening books? It's not our background, and what we see is over and over and over again when libraries offer programming, they offer programming that looks like the librarian because we feel like we're the gatekeeper and the person who has to serve it. So when someone walks in with a hard science background and says, I really do cool stuff, how do we turn around and say, great, you do it? And for a librarian, that's like, oh, what if it sucks? Or the one the one I love most often. What if no one comes? Like it'd be the first library program that we ever offer. That no one comes. But the thing is, if we do that, they come and say, all right, Minecraft, I noticed the shirt, if I may pick on Minecraft. I want to do a Minecraft program. All right, we'll get it all. You show up next Thursday. You come, no one else shows up. Whose fault is it that no one else showed up? Right? Ours. If, on the other hand, we sit and say, all right, how are we going to do this? Who else can come? And if no one shows up, whose fault is it now? Ours. And that's a very different discussion. Because the aftermath doesn't become, I'm so sorry. It's cold, and it's cold, right? Versus, okay, what else can we try next time? How does it work? And then you go, oh, but what if they don't know what they're talking about? How many books do you have in your collection that are crap? Right? If you're willing to stand up and verify the integrity of every piece of material that you have bought in your library, you are living in a delusional world. But here's the trick. Remember when I said our technical service folks had made that change? Collection development. Understanding, pairing them, working together, figuring out how they can use. These are skills that we need to bring to our communities so that we can transform because we then know our communities and are part of our communities. We don't offer Minecraft because the data says. We offer Minecraft because we have someone who loves it and can bring in other people who love it, and then libraries can help transformation because then they find an institution of their community that loves what they love. That relationship is what knowledge is about. If you want your community to be more knowledgeable, it is a matter of, yes, access and equitable access to data and information, but more so, it is a community and a conversation and a connection. Because no one will learn until they feel valuable enough to learn. Until our communities feel like they're heard, like we talk to them, with them, we plan with them, they're going to sit there and say, what are you doing for me? Or why would I care? So, I promised real practical. Time for some real practical. Librarians, get out of your damn buildings. I know I just violated the whole South Carolina swear. Get out of your buildings. Get out of your buildings. Get out of your buildings. Hey, could you get out of your buildings? Get out of your buildings. Right? The buildings are tools for the community. In the days of we were cataloging the world and we were building huge collections and we needed massive cataloging efforts, okay. But these are tools. The books are tools. The databases are tools. The laptops are tools, right? You have to get out of your building. Open every door that's closed. Retake that space. You need to go to where those conversations are occurring. Do you show up at the Economic Development Board? Do you show up at the arts community? Do you show up at the dean's meeting? Do you show up at the principal's meeting, the English department's meetings? Do you show up there and just listen? And after a time, you can begin to say, you know, I'm listening, and by the way, I think there's something I can help you out with. And I heard this other conversation, and then you're connecting. In the Baldwinsville Public Library in New York, the associate director, the assistant director of the library, is the head of the Board of Commerce. I'm saying that wrong. Chamber of Commerce, thank you so much. Why? Because she kept going to the meetings and she was so damn valuable, they finally said, fine, you take it. Get out of your buildings. Go into the departments. And use your collections, because your collection is the community. Right? Programming, collection development, etc. We like to think that our collection is the stuff we pull together, but it's not. That's our tool set. That's the construction set. That's the Legos, right? That's what we use to do what we really want to do, which is to build knowledge, which means to build connection, to build conversation, to build community. Okay? Why do we buy books? Because we love them? No, because they're so useful. Which books do we buy? Hopefully ones that are of great utility. To whom? The community that we serve. Richland County Public Library, which is in Columbia, South Carolina, they're going through major renovations. Brilliant library, by the way. Major renovations, so they're closing up buildings. The best line was, well, this is the second floor, we moved stuff away because we realized that we gave the best view to the books. Go back to your library and look at the best views and understand, are the books facing them or are the people? And anyway, they did this, and the paper came and wrote up, they were redoing stuff. And then invariably, what was the little fact that they slipped in? And yes, there will be fewer books. To which, the comment section. Melanie Huggins is the director. Wrong, Melanie. Because in the thing she said, libraries are about people. Wrong, Melanie. Libraries are about books. I tried not to respond. I really did. And the books are for, question mark? Right? People often take that pointy book and whatever, Dave hates collection. Dave loves collection. And if you think you're in the book business, you're doing it wrong. If you're in the book business, stop putting plastic on them. Stop putting stickers on them and stop letting them go home where people can drink and eat on top of them, right? If you're in the book business, you're in the book destruction business. Let's be honest. What you've done is bought new books and you've created a system whereby they get worn out, the spines get crushed, and if they're really good books, they get destroyed in seconds, right? You are, in fact, the antithesis of the book people. You are the book evil people. Right? Right? You're in the community business. And those books and those materials and the programming are all part of that. That's what you need to do. So practical. Get out of your buildings, use your collections, engage your community, talk to your community. What do we need to do for the LIS education? Yes, I'm going to blame myself. Right? Firstly, we need to focus on core values. We need to understand that what makes a librarian special is not their ability to speak Mark. Because right now, it's RDA, and tomorrow it will be something else. It is not that which makes a librarian. It's our mission, and it's our values. A value for service. We believe that we want to make our communities better. Right? Think about this for a moment. One of the reactions to the whole political situation is, oh, we should need to pull back. I've had librarians say after the whole election thing, librarians need to double down on truth. We need to be and stand as a force for the truth. Good luck. Good luck determining what the truth is. But here's the other part. If you believe that your communities are better because they have libraries, you have an opinion. You have a bias. So we believe in service, but service means that we believe in a better and having a shared value that we are open and transparent. We believe that learning is fundamental to what we do. That simply providing materials and books and such without worrying about whether it makes a difference in a person's life is not useful. Now, I want to be really clear. That doesn't mean that we should get rid of fiction and we should only be nonfiction and only hand out textbooks. Some of the most amazing learning occurs from stories. Right? Even if all we're learning is what we believe or what we see. But fiction, we know that those stories can unlock potential. One of the amazing things is when we talk about women in the developing world. One of the most important things we can do is we can provide narratives and stories that show the normality of progress. Show the potential and options that they never knew they had. And that can happen probably better in the form of a narrative than it is in some lovely political essay. We believe in openness, that we do this, that we provide people and show them our process in transparency. We believe in intellectual freedom and safety. A library should be a safe place to access dangerous ideas. We should be the place where people feel safe to explore and investigate. Should be. And we believe in intellectual honesty, not unbiased, not objective. We believe that we show our sources. We show our work. Right? The difference between us and the fake news of the day and the Facebook feed of yesterday is if you want to know where we came up with that, we can show you. And we can show multiple sources, and we can show the background. Now, we can call that information literacy all we want, but it really is a way of embracing a way of understanding things. We need to teach facilitation. We need to teach librarians that they are most powerful not when they stand behind a desk, but when they stand beside a patron. Justin Henke, fantastic library director in Pennsylvania, was at Chattanooga before that. He bought a 3D printer, and he ran the youth services floor. And when he got the 3D printer, he walked right out into the middle of the teen area, found a table, unpacked it, and started putting it together. And as people would walk by, he goes, "Hey, can you help me? Hey, you want to try this?" And he said at one point, they actually had to take a hammer and chisel to the amount of plastic that had formed around the extruder head. He said, but I learned out in the open, and I learned together, and I learned with. And I modeled for my members, my patrons, whatever you want to call it, I modeled the fact that we all are learning, and we're constantly learning. How can we expect radical positive advancement, change in our communities if we don't model that ourselves? If we don't demonstrate that we don't know everything, but we're willing to learn? We need to teach facilitation. We need to understand that as a librarian, you are the core value. And many librarians are not comfortable with that. But we have to understand that you are the facilitator. You have value. You are important. How many times in our staff development do we spend time teaching you about the latest gadget, the newest piece of technology, the greatest book, right? And how many staff development do we spend time going, are you comfortable in public? What is your value? What's your strength? What are you scared of? Because think about that for a moment. When you went through library education, how much time did you spend reflecting on your own values and what you saw as important? And I know that sounds really self-serving and we're in the service business, but unless you are comfortable with yourself and your role out in the community, you are going to limit your effectiveness. We need to do a hell of a lot more investigating our own psyches than we do now. And we need to emphasize knowledge creation and not consumption. This is where I tell you to stop calling people users. You say, why? How many people feel that you effectively serve your users? Oh yeah, I know, I'm giving it away. All right, let me go jump to this one. How many people like being used? I'm going to do consumer next, right? How many like being consumed? That model of they come to us, we give them stuff, they walk away, right? That's not the relationship we want. That's not a community. Academic, school, public, that's not what we want. What we want is a connection. We want people to know each other, to know of each other, and to know with each other. That means that we have members. That means that we call them patrons. I like neighbors, right? Call them something, but don't set them apart as, well, they come in, we give them a great customer experience, and they leave. You will not win the customer experience road. You will win the, I went in, that's mine. I saw me, it was me, it's my community. That's the role we need to be in. We need to teach people that in the middle of Maine, they have just as much right, authority, and ability to produce as anyone in Silicon Valley or Hollywood or New York. Right? Everyone has a video camera and through their library access to high-speed internet access. We can broadcast, we can produce music, we can produce video. We can come together and knit together. We can be producers. We live in an agriculturally enriched world. They're the original makers. They make food, right? How do we share that? That's the kind of experience that we can share. And for scholars, so I may be talking amongst myself. Phil Turner I saw here before, so Phil can take this back. Stop documenting the world and start improving it, right? True validation of a finding is not statistics, but in action. It's not enough for us to write a study and say, well, that's the way it is. It's not enough for us to sit in an ivory tower and write a document and say, there it is. We got to try it. We got to do it. If you're an academic library and you need to write articles for tenure, stop data mining your circulation statistics and going, this is interesting, and start looking at those data and saying, and this is how we're going to change it. This is how we're going to be part of it. Right? So in South Carolina, to pick on myself again, we know that we live in a very rural state, not very different from Maine. We know that out in the rural state, we have a horrific education problem. We had a documentary created, it was titled The Corridor of Shame. It is a problem. And so it's one thing to go out and study, to look at this literacy issue. We also have a workforce problem. So you know what South Carolina is really, really, really good at? Stealing industry. We have a tax base. I'm telling you, when I moved to South Carolina and they told me what my taxes were, I nearly laughed. Now I'm driving on the roads, not laughing as much, but we were talking to a mortgage broker and asking if we, what kind of house we could afford, and the mortgage broker is going, all right, so let's see, so on a $350,000 house, that's about $2,000 a year in taxes. My wife literally laughed. Excuse me? Right? Because we're paying $10,000 on a $100,000 less house in New York. Right? So, hey, you know what South Carolina is not good at? Providing a skilled workforce to the industry that we poach. So Boeing comes from Kansas. Boeing comes from Seattle. Thank you. And they set up in the Charleston area. Lovely. You should come visit. And they go to hire people in high-tech manufacturing, and they find out, not so much. So what do? No problem. We need STEM education. They go into the high schools, they begin offering STEM education. You know what they find? High school students can't read. So now they're going to third grade reading level. It turns out if kids aren't reading by the third grade reading level at grade level, there is a much increased risk that they are going to drop out of school, that they have a lower performance, and that they will never get to the point of being a valued workforce. What Boeing is realizing is that their workforce preparation has to begin with reading at the third grade level. Now, we do these studies, but it's the one thing to study is the corridor of shame. By the way, the prevailing motto of the South Carolina education system in the past decade is thank God for Mississippi. It's getting better, right? But what we did is we said, all right, if that's what's happening, we do studies on it, let's figure this out. So what they did was they went over to the athletics department and said, everyone loves Cocky. Cocky's our mascot. I'm not making this up. And they put Cocky on a bus with a bunch of undergraduates, and they drove out to rural South Carolina, and everyone was excited to show up for Cocky. And when they did, they gave him a new book. And they've given out over 100,000 books to kids out in rural South Carolina. But then they realized that when they're giving out these books, that what's happening is these kids and their parents need information on things like nutrition and basic health information. And so then they began providing health information. And all of the time, accumulating and collecting the data. We need to talk about good studies and good science that are good in reality and do good. So what a knowledge school is, what we need to do with LIS education, what we need to do with our libraries is we need action. Because what it comes down to, at the end of the day, is that we are the right profession at the right time. as a profession that has shifted, not painlessly and not quickly, but a profession that has shifted from collections and materials and stuff and buildings to professionals and community and engagement and transformation. We are a profession built on service to all, built on service to the underrepresented voices and the majority, built for outreach, built for change, built on a promise of a better day. We are a profession through degree, through job title, through spirit. We are professionals who are there dedicated to helping our communities in the hard times and the good times. We are there to know and to help others know about a better tomorrow. So when we look at this map, when we look at the idea of divided nations and divided politics, and we take a look up in our corner of our blues and reds, what institution is better prepared to engage a world of uncertainty than ours? What profession is better prepared to work both with those who liked the results and didn't like the results, but to ensure that all people are treated fairly under this system? What profession is better prepared to help heal, to help push forward, to help push our country and our communities and our neighbors into a better tomorrow than librarianship? And the answer is none. This is our time. This is our opportunity. This is the moment that calls for us to stand up. This is the moment that calls for us to answer the best of what we can be, that believes not that more surveillance, more oversight, giving up of privacy is the future, but that believes that privacy and individual rights is essential, that believes in openness and transparency, that believes in equity of access, that our values forged over 4 millennia are now needed more than ever. And the answer is none. Librarianship is the key profession in helping this country move forward. Thank you. Questions? Please.
How do we fund it?
How do we fund it is a great question. That is the essential question, isn't it, right? Which is, yay, Dave. I'm essential. I wish I could be paid like I was essential. And the short answer is, one, I think we have a generational issue. We have to be advocates and lobbyists, right? So advocacy is not evil. Advocacy is essential and important. And I understand that many of us are in an awkward position, particularly in public libraries. How do you advocate when you're a civil servant, etc.? And the answer is the Maine Library Association. The answer is call me. The answer is the state library, what role it can play. So we need to share each other's ability, right? So in our academic settings, if you're the employee, then you need the public libraries to stand up. One of the things that really bothers me right now is the decimation of school librarians. Right? If you look at any part of librarianship that is, there is no part of our field that is better researched and demonstrated its impact in school libraries. I mean, it is amazing. But what we often glance over is that the effectiveness comes from an active professional school library program, not merely the presence of the library. But we need to advocate for those. We need to be out there pushing it. How we fund it is we need to demonstrate that we have social good. That's back to the idea of community. It starts by, how do I serve this one person, and they tell a friend, and they tell a friend. And so that's the kind of thing we need to do, but it's also a generational issue. Why is it that we have an undergraduate program in South Carolina, we have in Syracuse, we have Washington? We need to not only prepare great librarians, we need to prepare the mayors, the principals, the board members, the provosts, who hire and compensate them as well. And so we need to do a better job of less self-congratulatory and much more in-your-face librarianship. And so the short answer is advocacy, and we need to be ready for political action. We need to give up the idea that librarianship is apolitical. It is political. That's exactly right. The best advocates we have are the people we serve with, not ourselves. It's true. That's where we need to be. And that comes back to John Kraska of Every Library. I'm a huge supporter of Every Library. He says that one time every year, which is the year of the budget vote, you move from being the loved librarian to the political candidate, right? You move to the idea of, what's your role? Do I buy it? Do I not buy it? Oh, we're in Maine, we don't. By the way, I've never been in a state where everyone says, we love taxes, we want to spend more. I don't, honestly. I'm into those, as a liberal Democrat, I do stand up and go, taxes are important. That doesn't mean I'm happy when I write that check. But that idea of going out and being aware of what's the value. And that means librarians need to stand up and be seen and be noted. Little side note, stick with me for a second. A group of librarians in Oregon, when they were talking to teens, they were talking about how do we reach out and do better service to teens. And so they had a focus group, and the teens said, librarians said, what do you want from us? And the teens said, we want you to blog. And the librarians were like, what? We want you to blog. And they sort of worked on it. What they really wanted, the teens wanted reading advisory. They wanted to know what to read next. But they needed to get that advice from someone they knew. In other words, you tell me these are great books. Their first question is, who the hell are you? And so by having librarians blog, not about, well, this is what happened Thursday, but by what they saw, what they value, what they care, by themselves, the teens could build a relationship and could then value that assessment. I've had librarians say, if I do my job right, no one knows I was there. It's like the ninja librarianship school. Or what is it, the duck metaphor, right? We're paddling like hell under the water, but on top we seem serene. Stop it. What we do is important and hard work, and we're professionals, and we need to be compensated by that, but we also need to let people know that we have value and we're important as well. Because what's happening in the UK, and I know it's happening here, is, oh, libraries cost too much money, we'll just have a volunteer to run them. That will happen when people believe that libraries are collections of books and materials. Until they understand the value of the profession, until we help them, until we sit next to them and give them value and say, by the way, if you need anything else, please let me know. Would you mind 5 minutes on what a good librarian is? Whatever it is. How do we build that kind of awareness? So we need to be much more comfortable with self-promotion as well, but to build that partnership so that they then advocate for us. Other questions, thoughts? Break out the wine. Things that we can be doing right away is Fayetteville Public Library, little itty bitty library, really nice, affluent area of New York, has a survey. They had a volunteer problem. Anyone have volunteers programs? Anyone feels that perhaps you're spending a little bit more time on the volunteers than you're getting back from the volunteers? This was their problem. That they had a situation where, they were having people come in, they're like, okay, well, I guess you can do this today or something. Sue Kowalski, East Syracuse Manoa school librarian, she had the same situation. She had students volunteering in the library, and she just, so much work to figure out what they could do that she wasn't getting to do a real job. What Fayetteville did was they realized we were doing 180 degrees wrong. We were getting experts and people with amazing life experience walking into our community, and we were trying to turn them into little librarians. They said, we need to stop it. So what they did is they developed a form. And after you get story time, you borrow a Kindle, you do whatever, you get this survey. I know, survey. It's got 3 questions. What do you love? What are you passionate about? 3, are you willing to share that with your neighbors? And so people would write in, oh, I love engineering, I love technology, I love Doctor Who, I love whatever. And then what happens is the director would call them up and say, we see that you love this, would you be willing to do a program on that? Would you be willing to put together a session? And that's turned into everything from, they now have a makerspace. It's about as big as this area. And over here are 3D printers, over there are tools. Over here are, I believe, 8 computerized sewing machines. The librarians are terrified of the sewing machines. They said, we get a jammed up 3D printer, we're there in seconds. We hear that some stitch dropped and we're like, we're done. And that's the point, because what those sewing machines aren't there for the librarians to teach people to sew. They're there because a community of sewers came in and said, we need a place to teach and help and bring people together. And in fact, one of the volunteers said, you know, they have the sewing machines, but I don't think the librarians know what they're talking about. It's like, you're right, that's your job. In East Syracuse, Manoa, when Sue realized that, she formed what she called the I-Team. And the I-Team were people that would come in and they would organize the shelves because they knew how to find stuff better than she did. They would do the book selection. She would, in essence, help to approve it. They began doing technical support. And so they had teachers come in and say, you know, I want to implement this new piece of technology, but I don't know it too well. And Sue would say, oh, I can give you this student who will help you. And this teacher's like, oh, I don't think so. I think perhaps I would rather have my fingernails pulled out than to expose to a middle school student that I don't know how to do Google Docs. But what happened over time was that one teacher finally said, okay, fine. And it worked out so well that she told a friend, and then he told a friend, and he told a friend. And now they're almost like graduate assistants, indentured servitude at the middle school levels. And they began providing those services. And the point of this is really, and by the way, in Cornell, so an academic example, in Cornell, it turns out that they lend out kayaks. I did not know. An academic library with kayaks. They have a nice little river that you can kayak on. And by the way, they have a library up a hill that lends the kayak, and I really did try and talk them into a shoot. But they didn't do that. But it began with, the librarians were kayakers, but they began bringing in clubs, and they began bringing in local organizations, and they began supporting them. So the very short, easy thing to do immediately is to identify passionate people in your communities and ask them to share that with other people through your library. And by doing that, you're going to feel really weird the first time you do it, and it's going to be a little scary. But that's what you're going to need to do. You're going to need to begin doing that. In Pistoia, outside Florence, Italy, Stella runs the library. They have 14 FTEs. They have 50 programs a weekend going on. They have psychologists, they have metal workers, they have artists, they have a film studio, they have all of these things, and they bring them in, and the community gathers to show and demonstrate that, right? Here's the trick. If you're sitting there going, what program can I put on that's going to bring people in, you're doing it wrong. What you want to do is you want to find a community that already is engaged and see if you can bring them into the building, or you can go out to them. So that's just immediately some things you can begin doing right now.
So what were those 3 questions again?
I'm going to, what do you love? What are you passionate about?
How are those 2 different?
You can do it in 2. Are you willing to share that with other folks? Actually, I have if you give me a second, I think, I can get you a copy of it. But it really is, what are you passionate about? What are you willing to share? And that turned in, interestingly, they had someone who came and was very interested in pre-literacy. The idea that, when they're toddlers or even before, they're not reading yet, but how to get ready. They had a teacher come in and say, I'm really interested and passionate about pre-literacy. And they said, great, you can teach a class. And she goes, I teach classes. I'm done teaching classes. I don't want to. And so instead what she did is she put together kits with a board book, a lesson plan, and a toy. So one of them is the idea of words to actions. And so the board book was on motion, trucks and things, and the toy was one of those you roll it, it rolls back kind of thing. And so she put those kits. They now have kits on astronomy, so you can lend out telescopes. They have kits on electronics, so you can have oscilloscopes, and they have baking pan kits. By the way, baking pan kits, awesome, right? Seed libraries for people who are doing gardening. So it can be stuff-based, but it's having that community around it to do it. questions, comments? Oh, I'm at time. Thank you once again. I really appreciate it. I hope to spend a lot more time in Maine. So have a great rest of the conference.
Sorry.